Hey everybody, just wanted to share with you 7 of the biggest LSAT test day mistakes. Last night in the LSAT Unplugged Facebook group, I did a Facebook Live for about a little over an hour actually. And I did it because the LSAT's coming up in just a few days, and I know that a lot of you are nervous about it. But I also know that a lot of you couldn't make it last night. So I wanted to do a quick little recap of the first portion of what I presented, which was, again, the 7 biggest LSAT test day mistakes. If you'd like to see the full recording of that Facebook Live, go over to my Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/LSAT Unplugged, where I'll share the full recording there. Now, in the meantime, my topic for today is just test day prep. I noticed that a lot of the things that end up leading students to have what I call test day score drops fall into 2 major categories. First, we have stress and anxiety. Those are huge. On the flip side, we have things like little silly or stupid mistakes that can get in the way, even if your accuracy and understanding of the exam is solid. And so I'll break these 7 mistakes into those two different categories. First off is stress reduction. A lot of times people get so wrapped up in their particular LSAT test date, thinking that it's all about this one test. I want you to instead recognize that while the LSAT itself, of course, is extremely important and is the #1 factor in law school admissions, no one particular LSAT test date will make or break your score, because you can always retake the LSAT. Law schools do not average multiple LSAT scores. The other night, I held an in-person LSAT meetup here in Brooklyn, and one of the students who came, he was taking the LSAT in just a few days, and I said to him, there is another LSAT coming up in June. There's another one in July. Would it kill you to register for that LSAT test date as well, even if you might not necessarily need it? Of course, it's another nearly $200 to register, but if it gives you peace of mind and helps your actual upcoming LSAT test date go a bit more smoothly, helps you get just a few more points, then that is well worth it. Because even just a single point more on the LSAT can lead to thousands of dollars in scholarship money or getting into a better law school. And so it's well worth the investment to give yourself that peace of mind if you can afford just that $190 for that test registration. And of course, if you have an LSAC fee waiver, then you get a couple of LSAT registrations for free. So remember that you always have chances to retake in the future, especially now with the LSAT being offered more and more frequently. The second mistake I see students making is getting bogged down, getting stuck, getting stressed out when one particular LSAT question doesn't go your way. And so I want you to let go of that question and move on to the following one, knowing that you can always come back to it later. Typically, even I personally, I'll skip 3 to 5 questions in the moment. I'll let go of those. And they're questions that I have no clue how to solve in the moment. And that's even with my understanding of this exam as deep as it is. Stress, the timing, knowing it's the real thing, those are all huge. And of course, they are much more stress-inducing than doing the exam on your own from the comfort of your own home, where you can be a bit more generous with the timing and the pacing and taking breaks and all things of that nature. And so I want you to reset after every single question. For that reason, I actually like to bubble question by question rather than page by page or section by section, because that bubbling gives my mind a chance to reset. It lets me let go of what I previously did, and I move on to the following one, which brings me to issue number 3 that students make, which is getting bogged down on those tough questions, throwing in minute after minute after minute, and not making any headway at all. And that can happen in a variety of questions. Everyone has their own personal least favorite question type. For me, it was often the principal application questions or those lengthy parallel questions, the ones that take up half a page, especially if they're on difficult topics like science or philosophy, or all 5 choices look identical to each other at first glance. And so again, let go. If you're investing a minute or 2 and your understanding is not improving in the slightest, skip it, come back to it later once again. There are a couple of silly mistakes I see students making as well. One of them is the name on their government ID not matching the name on the admission ticket. Maybe one of those has a misspelling, maybe someone who got married changed their last name in some way, or it could just be some silly error of some kind. Of course, your university school ID is not sufficient. It needs to be an actual government ID. But if you notice any differences between what you see on your government ID and your admission ticket, then I would definitely recommend that you get that solved now. Contact LSAC, call them, email them at lsacinfo@lsac.org. get that straight away now. You still got a couple days to make the difference there. Another mistake I typically see students making is waiting until the end of the section to bubble, waiting for the proctor to give that 5-minute warning. There is no guarantee the proctors will actually remember to give that 5-minute warning, and you don't want to be reliant upon them. Or even if you do, let's say you start bubbling at the 5-minute warning, then you have to go back and switch gears from bubbling to actually thinking about LSAT problems. That sort of context switching may not be easy to do in the moment. And so for that reason, I recommend bubbling question by question or game by game or passage by passage, something like that, just so that you have it taken care of. You also, of course, want to avoid misbubbling as well. There are some cases where LSAC will correct that if it was clearly some sort of error. Like let's say you bubbled to question 28 when there's a max of 27 questions per section, you skipped one. Of course, that can all be fixed, but that's such a headache, such a stress inducer. You want to avoid that if possible. Another silly mistake I see students making is getting overly wrapped up in what other people are doing, either before walking into the test or during the test itself. Focus on yourself. Focus on what you are doing. You can't necessarily rely on other people. What they're saying may not be accurate. They may be trying to, puff up their egos a bit. They may be trying to troll you a little bit. And so don't think at all about what they're doing. Focus on yourself. And remember that they may not even be doing the same section that you are in the moment. So always have that peace of mind to just focus on what you're doing. Those other people, they're kind of a wild card. You never know what they're going to say or what they're going to do. So just stick with yourself. And of course, the proctors may be circling the room. They may interrupt you at times. Try not to let them get the best of you. Try to just focus on yourself and the booklet in front of you. The last big mistake I see students making is kind of silly as well. And it comes down to trying out something new, trying out some new strategy. Maybe you've been reading the stimulus first and suddenly on test day, you say, you know what, that hasn't really been working for me. I'm going to try reading the question stem first. Big mistake to do that for the first time on test day itself because you're not practiced in that. So if you're planning to change something up, try something new, whether it's related to pacing or timing or just the way you approach particular questions, do it now first in your practice runs. You still have a few days to do that. It could be doing a timed full-length exam, maybe on the Thursday before the exam, or maybe it's doing just a few sections here and there before work, during lunch, or after work for an individual 35-minute sit down. Even that alone could give you a sense of whether this strategy will really work for you or not. So the last thing I'll say is properly simulating test day conditions. So that's kind of a bonus strategy for you here. If you've been practicing with only 4 sections, know that on test day, you're going to have 5. And you might even have 3 logical reasoning sections back to back. That could happen. So if you've never done that before, or your worst nightmare might be 2 reading comps back to back or 2 games back to back, then I would definitely suggest experimenting with that now, because there's no obligation on LSAC's part to give you things in a nice, clean order where they're constantly mixing it up to give you a break from the other ones. So whatever would be your worst case scenario, practice that now. You can do it on Wednesday today. You could do it Thursday tomorrow. I would definitely recommend taking the day before the exam off to just rest and relax. But know that if you haven't been properly simulating test day conditions fully with all the strict timing and the stress of knowing that this really does matter to you to some extent, then of course, test day might be a little bit tougher. So just be on the lookout for maybe doing 1 or 2 points lower than your practice test average. Of course, on the other hand, if you have been doing everything right and mimicking test day conditions as closely as possible, then you can realistically expect that what you see on test day will be relevant to what you've done previously and your scores may match up more closely. And then of course, rest the day before, walk in Saturday and kill it. Just kill this exam. I have a lot of videos where I walk through every aspect of preparing for test day. I'll share a link in the description for this episode. If you would like to check that out, I've got it right here in the chat and I'll put it in the description as well. That's just my LSAT Unplugged Test Day Prep YouTube playlist. I also have a full recording of last night's Facebook Live in the LSAT Unplugged Facebook group, and I'll share with you a link to that as well. If you want to check out the full recording, it's a little over an hour. I presented on the test day mistakes as well as on how to prepare for the June, July LSATs and beyond over the next 2 to 3 months, as well as the transition towards the digital LSAT. I also saved some time for Q&A. And so if you would like to check that out, then go to facebook.com/groups/LSAT Unplugged, and I will approve your membership to join and check that out. Anyway, thanks for joining me this afternoon. I hope you found this helpful, and please feel free to reach out if you need anything at all. You can find me at lsatunplugged@gmail.com if you want to email me. You can check out the LSAT Unplugged YouTube channel at youtube.com/LSAT You can also find my podcasts on iTunes, Spotify, and Google Play. Just search for LSAT Unplugged and the LSAT Pros podcast as well. Anyway, all the best on the LSAT this Saturday. I hope you kill it, and reach out and let me know how it goes. Take care.